welcome to another edition of Ball Don't Lie. Nah, I'm just playing with you guys. This is the Top Prospects podcast, but Logan, we're repping the NBA jerseys today. I don't know. Are we starting to turn into a basketball podcast?
I mean, we could be replacing Ball Don't Lie. They are not really doing podcasts on Penn State Sports Night anymore, but I'm repping the Atlanta Hawks. You're repping the Philadelphia 76ers. They're playing in the second round. This is the wrong sport for this podcast here. Obviously, we're a baseball podcast going with basketball today, but we could be turning into Ball Don't Lie. It could be that steady growth down there. We don't know.
If you squint really hard, I might be like the clearance rack version of Hunter Pitcock. We'll have to see. But quick, give me your predictions for this series here while we're on the topic. I got Sixers in six. I'm a little bit worried though if Embiid's not back.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of feeling the same way. As much as I love my guy Trae Young, I'm not a Hawks fan, by the way. I know you're a Sixers fan. Just have the Hawks jersey, but I'm probably saying Sixers in six, maybe seven. I mean, really depends on Embiid.
Yeah, for sure. But getting back to some baseball talk here, it's been another interesting week around the league. One thing to start off with, which is not really great news, something that I don't really want to have to be talking about on this podcast, is the Marcell Ozuna debacle here. Not really a debacle. I mean, it's his career might be done. So Marcell Ozuna was arrested for domestic assault this past week against his wife, and it appears I think he actually posted bail and is out of jail now. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming into that in terms of investigations and from local police in Atlanta and from the MLB. But I mean, definitely not great for Ozuna at all. I mean, I don't want to obviously say his career is over, but I mean, for the Braves, it obviously it's hard to forgive something like that. I mean, that's completely unacceptable. You can't have that both in baseball and just in life in general.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, domestic violence stuff in all sports, and not even just sports, and just real life in general, it isn't really going to be taken too lightly. I mean, obviously, those punishments are very harsh, no matter who it is. And Marcell Ozuna, it's just unfortunate that he got himself into that situation, especially since he kind of turned his career around while he was in Atlanta last year, had a great shortened season, was in the running for MVP, but now on top of already struggling to begin the season, just coming out with this domestic violence stuff, it's definitely going to be tough news for the Atlanta Braves. Obviously, it's a tough situation for everyone involved there in that Marcell Ozuna circle, but it's just a tough situation for anyone to deal with there. And obviously, you hope all is well with everything going on. But as you said, Marcell Ozuna did post bail, but all sports really have harsh punishments when it comes to domestic violence stuff like that. So it's going to be tough for me to see Marcell Ozuna in a Braves jersey, in an MLB jersey for quite some time now. And it's going to be a tough blow to the Braves. They've already struggled offensively, aside from Ronald Acuna. That offense has really struggled to find production, and Ozuna is supposed to be a big part of that Braves outfield this season. And the fact that he won't be in Atlanta for the foreseeable future is going to be a tough blow for that Atlanta team.
It definitely is. I mean, luckily, it seems as though I believe his wife is okay. Um, from what it says in the report was that the he basically tried to strangle his wife, and it was witnessed by an officer. So I mean, I'm assuming, and rightfully so, that they're going to throw the book at him, and he's going to get a big time punishment both from the league and local law enforcement. So I'm going to be honest. I don't know that he gets another shot in a uniform. I mean, and this isn't something that, unfortunately, this isn't a one-off incident. I mean, this is something that's happened around the league. Aroldis Chapman was suspended for 30 games back in 2016. Domingo Herman was suspended for 81 games, and this was just last year. Julio Urias, another one for the Dodgers, he was suspended for 20 games. Odubel Herrera for the Phillies, closer to home for me, was suspended for 85 games starting back in 2019. He really, I mean, he honestly, and I know a lot of Phillies fans, including myself, I mean, I didn't really want to see him in a Phillies uniform, to be completely honest, just because of everything that happened. But he did come back this year and wasn't really supposed to be a part of the team's plans, but with Adam Hazley and Roman Quinn and now, of course, Bryce Harper being out of the lineup, they kind of had to put him in there, which I'm not really, again, sure if he was part of their plans, but this definitely isn't a one-off incident. I mean, even going further, Addison Russell is one, Jarius Familia, another one for the Mets. So definitely something that baseball, I think that they've cracked down on. I mean, looking at the length of the suspensions here, but it's definitely something that obviously needs to stop.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, domestic violence is obviously a big issue, really everywhere. But all those guys you mentioned in those domestic violence cases, they have gotten second chances, or at least most of them have gotten second chances in the MLB. But it did take a lot of time before that did happen. So obviously, a Marcell Ozuna suspension should be coming sometime soon. And you mentioned that the league is cracking down on stuff like that. So it could be longer than the 20, 30 game suspensions we've seen in the past. Obviously in leagues like the NFL, domestic violence issues often result into ban for life or even like a year-long ban, stuff like that, like a Ray Rice example that happened a couple of years ago. So it's really up in the air about what happens to Ozuna. But what's interesting about this case is that Ozuna's wife at the time got arrested for domestic violence last May, I think, for hitting Ozuna himself. So this family has this history of domestic violence, and I don't think that should really go unnoticed in this case at all. But it should be interesting to see what the MLB, what Rob Manfred really decides in this.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, unfortunately, just doesn't seem like a healthy relationship. I'm not sure if he has any kids, but that's who besides his wife, obviously, I really feel for his kids having to put up with this. Now it seems like 2 years in a row between obviously the allegations against his wife last year and now him. So in terms of the suspension, I mean, I have a feeling it's going to be considering officers say that they witnessed it. I mean, it may honestly be as long as I think it was Sam Dyson got a complete season suspension this past, or I guess it was in March that they issued that. It may be a season long suspension, but we'll have to provide updates as that continues on. But turning more to the baseball side of things now, I mean, this leaves the Braves with a pretty big hole. I mean, their outfield right now is obviously, Acuna, who is great. But and then Adrianza and Guillermo Heredia. So not exactly a high-powered offense in Atlanta like last year when you had Acuna, Ozuna, and Markakis. So a little bit of turnover there, and that kind of leaves the lineup with some holes.
Yeah, definitely. And this Braves offense, aside from Acuna, has really struggled all season long. Freddie Freeman won the MVP last year. He's had a rough start to the season. We mentioned Marcell Ozuna finished, I believe, top five in the MVP voting, and he's not even playing baseball right now. And that outfield, really that entire lineup in general for Atlanta, looking really different. And Guillermo Heredia was on the Mets last year as kind of that fill-in player. So the Braves kind of doing the exact same thing that the Mets did. But looking around the league, guys like maybe Anthony Santander, Joey Gallo, guys that the Braves could really go after for a trade, maybe like a Charlie Blackmon, the options are there for a long-term piece if Marcell Ozuna doesn't come back, because Ozuna was supposed to be on, I think it was a 4-year contract, something like that. It was a long-term deal. But now I think you have to look at kind of that Marcell Ozuna replacement for the long term. And guys like Gallo, Blackmon, Santander, they're definitely guys that they could look at, the Braves can. And we're about 2 months away from the trade deadline being over. That deadline is on July 31st. So the deadline is fast approaching as we are already in June. So the Braves, they have the time. They're currently in second place in a very tight NL East division. They're 3.5 games back of the Mets right now. So the options are still there. And All they really need is that one piece to catch up to that New York team.
I definitely do think that they're going to go for that long-term replacement. The only problem is that their ownership group hasn't exactly been super high on wanting to spend a lot of money. I mean, they're not near the luxury tax, but if you just look at since Liberty Media, their owner took over, they haven't been inclined to be in the top half for the payroll. I mean, their highest was actually last season. They were 10th in the league at 181 million. Well, which is still, well below the luxury tax level. I believe about 20 million below. But other than that, they've been mostly middle of the pack, 13th in the league in 2019, 19th in the league in 2018. So they're not, they haven't shown a willingness to spend. And now that they have, of course, coming off of a year with the pandemic, I do wonder if they're going to be willing to take on a big salary like a Charlie Blackman. I mean, maybe the only way I could see maybe that kind of a deal going through, since he's getting paid 21 million, would be one, if somehow Marcell Ozuna's money doesn't count towards the competitive balance tax. I'm not exactly sure how that would work. And two, maybe if Atlanta were willing to give up some bigger prospects in exchange for Colorado eating some of the money. Also, Colorado ate a lot of money on the Arenado contract and got basically nothing back. So who knows? Colorado might just give him up for peanuts. But I do think that they have to look for a longer range replacement, because you just don't know how long Ozuna is going to be out. I mean, he could very well be out deep into next year as well, and who knows how he comes back. Who knows, quite honestly, if they want to be the team that gives him a second chance. Some teams do, some teams don't, if he even is going to get a second chance. So they're going to have to go for that long-term replacement piece. I just don't know in terms of cost how much the ownership group is willing to make it work, considering they're already up around 160 million, and we're coming off of course, a pandemic in which owners, were complaining a lot about revenue, as I'm sure we'll see this offseason as well, when the competitive balance agreement gets hopefully agreed to, and we won't have a lockout. That would be kind of disappointing. But moving on to some other topics, Logan, we actually had some guys come back for the Mets this week. Shocking, I know, but your Mets kind of luckily hit that stretch where they got to play Colorado and Arizona, two of the bottom dwellers here in the league, but they're able to come through this okay. Got Pete Alonso back. So how you feeling about your New York Metropolitans?
Yeah, we've talked about it on numerous podcasts here. The Mets have had probably the worst luck with injuries in quite some time. And now we're starting to see some of those guys get back into the fold. Where in the Arizona series, they got Pete Alonso back, who had a great series, by the way, had a couple clutch hits there. And that alongside Francisco Lindor heating up, that could be an interesting top of the lineup there for the Mets. They also got Kevin Pillar back, and he has been great when he's played. He's got a couple singles in his pinch hit appearances, made a start. I believe it was against the Padres he started for yesterday. So he's now back in the fold after getting hit by the pitch in Atlanta a couple weeks ago. And then Seth Lugo coming back as well. He made a relief appearance in the game against Arizona, the last game of that series, and he hadn't played all year. And he was an all-star 2 years ago for the Mets out of the bullpen. So just getting help to a bullpen that's been taxed a lot over these past couple of games just because of the injuries to the rotation. That was probably the biggest return for the Mets this week was Seth Lugo coming back, just because you got Jeurys Familia, Miguel Castro, Edwin Diaz, Trevor May all being used for multiple innings at a time, because that rotation has been one of the most injured in all of baseball. So Seth Lugo coming back to eat some innings has been huge for the Mets. And you mentioned it comes at a time where they have a relatively easy schedule. They beat Colorado, they beat Arizona. Those series were relatively easy for the Mets. I think they lost one game in each series. So For the fact that they got to play those teams has been great, but now they take on a team like the Padres, one of the hotter teams in the MLB. They lost game one yesterday, but they still have a couple more games in that series in San Diego. So that should be fun as the Mets start to return to full strength, as guys like Francisco Lindor and James McCann start heating up in that lineup.
Yeah, I watched that Mets game last night. They nearly came back and won that, and actually I thought should have. Those 10-10 starts though on the East Coast are brutal. I mean, I enjoyed up until like midnight, and then you get towards like 1 o'clock, and I'm like, all right, that didn't even finish until like 1:30 or something. I was almost asleep after I forget who. I think it was Pilar grounded into that double play to end it. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough coming up. They got San Diego for three more, and then Baltimore, and then San Diego again for three. So I mean, obviously Baltimore, they should sweep those two games, but San Diego, good team. And speaking of the Padres, I meant to include this last podcast, but how are you feeling about the turnover, or not? I guess it was made by the same guy that made the University of Miami turnover chain, but the homer chain for San Diego, and then I believe it's the Oakland Athletics have a home run trident. So, I got to say, I'm a big fan of these props. But how are you feeling?
I absolutely love it. And I think we did talk about it on one of our podcasts earlier, but that chain for the Padres, especially when it spins, I feel like it's really cool to see. It's not fun witnessing it as a fan of the other team, but I feel like when you're looking at Padres highlights and seeing like Tatis at a home run put on the chain, I feel like that'd be really cool as a fan to kind of see. And then it's a merchandise item. You can like make that and then sell that to fans. I mean, I feel like that's just a really cool aspect of the game, and it's something that the teams around the league should really implement more. I mentioned the Oakland Athletics; they kind of do their same thing with the Trident as well. And with the game kind of growing and kind of building towards that younger audience, it's just a great way for the MLB to kind of do that as well, where you have young stars like Fernando Tatis balling out on a nightly basis, and then get that chain every time he hits a home run. I feel like this is a great way to grow that game and really kind of build that audience into that younger audience in a way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think it's a good way to kind of reach out to a younger audience. I mean, I love it. I mean, obviously, as an opposing pitcher, does it get under your skin? Yeah, I mean, possibly. But I think it's something that the game kind of needs more of. I mean, I wish the Phillies did something like that. I think it brings kind of the clubhouse together. I mean, just seeing when Tatis hit that one yesterday, kind of how they present, they do that whole like presentation of the chain. I love it. I think it brings the team closer together. I think it makes the fans kind of excited as well. So I think it's great. Obviously, we've kind of seen more of that in football now, college, and then now really up to the pros. But it's good to kind of see that excitement making its way towards baseball. Definitely, I love the home run celebrations. I think we kind of need more of that in baseball. It gets exciting, and likewise, if a pitcher wants to celebrate a big strikeout or whatever, go for it. I mean, obviously, I don't really think there's like a strikeout chain or anything, but if they want to do a fist pump and get all hyped on the mound, after getting out of a jam or whatever, that's fine too. I think the excitement is great, and I think it brings more people into the game. I don't see at all how it would be disrespecting the game. But speaking of disrespecting the game, I have to bring in a little dig at Tony La Russa here because Matt Joyce of the Phillies hit a grand slam up 13-3 in the ninth inning to make it 17-3 in a win over the Reds. And I could just hear Tony La Russa screaming after Matt Joyce hit that one out. I had to include that just because we were talking about, I guess, the supposed unwritten rules of the game. But yeah, I'm sure he would have disapproved. I didn't think Girardi said anything about it, but yeah, Tony La Russa, Matt Joyce would not see the ball field again for like a week after that one.
You talk about unwritten rules of the game. Talk about this unwritten Tony La Russa segment on every single podcast we do. It's just kind of been like this written thing in the podcast, but it's not an official segment. so far, but you got to love your little Tony La Russa dig in every single podcast we do. But back to the strikeout chain you were kind of mentioning with the pitchers. A great way to grow the game is celebrations for sure. But imagine if you're a hitter on a team and a pitcher strikes you out, and then they have to stop the game to award this strikeout chain to a pitcher. Like, let's say Marcus Stroman strikes you out. He has his little celebration, then they give him a chain every single time they strike someone out. Not only would it stop the game for a couple minutes, which I know Rob Manfred would absolutely hate that happening, but that would just get way too repetitive compared to a home run. I mean, I'm all for like your little fist bump, your little celebration after a strikeout, but I think a chain might be a little bit too much for that.
Yeah, maybe it would have to be something in the dugout, like if you get the win or whatever. Although I still maintain that wins for pitchers are a meaningless stat. See DeGrom, comma Jacob for that, considering he gets negative run support usually. But I mean, it's definitely exciting though to grow the game for sure. But moving on, also, we actually had another thing that was released. I believe it was yesterday or in the last couple days. But the All Star ballot was released. So exciting times ahead now in terms of voting. So I actually have, there was a list, I believe, if I can pull it up here from the MLB website, that they were kind of talking about who at the moment would be the, I guess, the leaders, not in terms of who's gotten the most votes so far, but I want to see if you agree with these. So for catcher, we got Salvador Perez and Buster Posey of the Royals and Giants. At first, we got Vlad Guerrero and Max Muncy of the Jays and Dodgers. At second, we got Semien and Chisholm of the Blue Jays and Marlins. At short, we got Bogarts and Tatis of the Sox and Padres. At third, we got Jose Ramirez and Chris Bryant of Cleveland and the Cubs. So, any, I guess, thoughts about rounding out the infield there? If you think, just off the top of your head here, if you think any of these guys you think don't deserve it or somebody's being snubbed. Um, for the most part, I actually think it's a pretty good list.
Yeah, I think the one name that I was kind of questioning was Jazz Chisholm being there. And I feel like I didn't know his stats were as good as they are, but even still hitting 271 and 6 home runs, I don't really kind of find that all-star worthy to me. Like maybe it's just because second base is a weaker position in the game. We kind of talked about it last week during our all-decade teams, but that those could be all-star worthy numbers. I'm not sure about all-star starter worthy numbers, and I feel like that's going to be kind of the debate there. I feel like he will be an all-star just because every team has to have one, and the Marlins are kind of weak in that department. But I don't really think he's an all-star starter right now. Chisholm is, but that was really the only one that kind of drew my attention there.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of made me question a bit. He started off really hot, but since coming back from injury, he's kind of been cooled off. I do think, no doubt, in the future he could be an all-star player. I think he's actually really exciting to watch. But I don't know that he's going to make it this year. Um, yeah, second base is tough. I mean, there's really not a lot of great names. I mean, I guess you could put Ozzy Albies. I mean, he's only hitting 251, but he's 9 homers. And honestly, you could make a case. I mean, Max Muncy, I guess, I don't know. I really think of him more as a first baseman. But he has played 19 games at second base. So according to Fangraphs, they kind of count him. So if you're going to count Max Muncy as a second baseman, then I think it should be him. But they already have him in at first base. So in terms of who else, yeah, Ozzy Albies. I mean, Adam Frazier for the Pirates. I mean, I know the Pirates are terrible, but he's hitting 333. Not great power numbers, but he's definitely hitting for average. So yeah, like we said, not a whole lot there. I think really the only other name that I just kind of forgot about that definitely should be on the list is Ryan McMahon. I know he's not hitting great for average. He's hitting 259, but he's hitting 13 homers. He's hitting for a lot of power, even away from Coors Field. and off to one of the best starts of his career. So I could definitely see him kind of being in there at second base as well. Moving on to the outfield, they have Aaron Judge, Byron Buxton, and Adolis Garcia for the Yankees, Twins, and Rangers, respectively. And then in the NL, Acuna, Betts, and Castellanos for the Braves, Dodgers, and Reds. So thoughts there on that list of outfielders?
Yeah, so looking at the outfielders here, Chris, I mean, it's really tough to kind of take out any of those guys because really all six of those players, all of them are really great. I mean, if you really want to look at the AL side, take out someone, you could add a guy like Trey Mancini, and obviously has a great story coming back from cancer, but he's actually put up a very solid season, hitting 284, 11 home runs. So it would be kind of tough for him to really replace anybody. Maybe he can replace like Aaron Judge, but overall, Mancini should be considered for that. And then in the NL side, it's really been a stacked year for outfielders. I mean, you could take a look at the guy like Jesse Winker hitting 348, 14 home runs, and he's not even the guy that you mentioned for one of those top three spots, but he's putting up a phenomenal season. But the dilemma is, who do you take out? I mean, Castellanos, Acuna, both of them fantastic players. And really, all three of those outfielders are great players as well. So it's really going to be tough to take anyone out. And the last thing, if you consider Shohei Ohtani to be like a DH slash a right fielder, he could be considered in that spot, but he hasn't really played a lot of outfield yet. But if he was an outfielder, that would make that case a lot harder in the AL side.
And I'm muted. Yeah, the one name I would take out here is Mookie Betts, and it's nothing really against him. He's just kind of had a bit of a down year. I know he's been banged up. I mean, he's made all-star games in the past, and I'm sure he'll have plenty of time to do it again in the future. But hitting 264 with 5 homers isn't gonna cut it for me in a year when you have guys like Chris Bryant who are putting up big numbers. I know Chris Bryant plays multiple positions. He plays third, obviously, first base, but then he can play all three outfield positions. So I would consider him. And then I would also consider Jesse Winker. I mean, Winker is a guy that I would almost be drawn to even more just because of the fact that I don't think he's made an all-star game before. I mean, I doubt it. He's kind of in the middle of his breakout performance this year. And I think what better way to kind of reward that than sending him to his first all-star game, hitting 14 home runs right now. He's already two behind his MLB high. And that was in 2019. He hit 16 homers in 113 games. This year, he's hit 14 homers in 47 games, hitting 348, 2.3 wins above replacement. He's been phenomenal. So I don't see how you can put Mookie Betts over him. Same with Mookie Betts over Chris Bryant. Not to say that Mookie Betts isn't necessarily better than them. He's just not having as good of a year as both of those players are having. But in terms of Acuna and Castellanos, I have no problems. Castellanos has had a fantastic year, and same with Acuna. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. Adolis Garcia, no problems there. Aaron Judge, I guess. I don't know. I kind of think that they can find somebody better than that, but I mean, Aaron Judge is kind of one of those people that he's a big name, so I guess he'll get it. But actually, looking at his stats, he's actually playing better than I would have thought. He's just still striking out a lot, which I guess is what bothers me. But he should probably be in there too. So no real complaints other than the Mookie Betts selection there. And then moving on to the DH, they have Shohei Ohtani, although they did say that, honorable mentions of JD Martinez, Stanton, Miggy Cabrera, Jordan Alvarez, and then Yermin Mercedes. But I think Shohei deserves this. I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the only thing that could change that is if he gets in as a pitcher. It really depends on which position he really could be an all-star in because realistically, Otani's an all-star in both spots as a starting pitcher and as a DH. But I feel like he's had more success in that DH spot this year just because his home run totals are close to league leading. He's, I think, one or two away from reaching that spot. But I think overall he is better suited at DH. But I wouldn't be surprised if he were a All-Star starting pitcher, and then that leaves guys like Yerman Mercedes, JD Martinez to kind of fill in that spot.
Well, speaking of some of those guys like JD Martinez and Yermin Mercedes, they might be the recipients of some upcoming awards as part of our next segment here. So moving on, so we were going to do this at the end of every month. We actually didn't do this for the end of April. So I guess what we're going to do is kind of combine the first 2 months here. So we're going to hand out some awards for the first 2 months right now. So awards like MVP, Rookie of the Year so far, I guess. Um, I guess Best Pitcher or Cy Young of the month or 2 months now. And hopefully we'll kind of continue this so that the end of June, end of July, we'll be able to carry it forward so that we're breaking it up into a more monthly award segment. But Logan, I guess we can start with the big one, MVP. Who do you have so far for MVP, I guess, through the first 2 months?
Yeah, so there are a lot of options really here when it comes to MVP, and the options here. I mean, it's really a lot of young players. I mean, it's just young players taking over the game of baseball right now, and I think the choice I kind of came up upon is just the guy who's just been dominating the month of May, and he's missed a little bit of time due to COVID, other injuries like that. But overall, Fernando Tatis has put up a fantastic year. He's hitting very close to 300 right now, hitting 299 right now with 17 home runs, already in double digits and stolen bases with 12. And this is a big year for Tatis, in my opinion, just because he hadn't played a full season yet. He had his rookie season. He had his rookie season cut off in 2019, and then the shortened pandemic season in 2020. He really had to show out and just prove why he could be an MVP candidate, and he's really done that so far. And I mentioned the stats so far. And the Padres, they had a very slow start to the season, but they're currently in second place or tied for second place in the NL West with a 35-23 record on the year. They're one game back on the San Francisco Giants, who lead that division right now. So he's obviously been a big part of why the Padres are where they are right now. And he's really just done a good job changing the game of baseball. We talked about it with the chain segment before on this podcast, but I feel like Tatis right now deserves my pick for MVP.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess we'll do it by league. So for NL MVP, Tatis is a good pick. I guess I'll try and differ a bit on that. I'll go with, I guess, I'll go with Ronald Acuna Jr. And the main reason I'm going with this is, I mean, he's put up big numbers, 20 or 290 for average, 17 homers, 2.7 wins above replacement, tied for fourth in the league. But the big deal for me is that he's really picked up the slack on this Atlanta team and kind of had to carry them. I mean, they've had some injuries in there with Max Fried being out for a while. I think now he's back, but he was out there for a while. Soroka's been hurt, but then in the lineup, they've had a lot of guys that haven't been as consistent. Freddie Freeman has been good, but his average, his power numbers are there with 12 homers, but his average is not. He's still hitting 227. Ozzy Albies has come on really strong lately, but for the first month and a half or so of the season, he wasn't hitting above like 230. Same with Dansby Swanson, and then of course with some guys hurt. They have Travis d'Arnaud hurt, which is a big piece of their lineup. Marcell Ozuna, with obviously he was hurt and he was struggling before he was hurt, and then had the whole incident with his wife there. But he's really had to pick up that Braves lineup and be a consistent force, and he's done a great job of doing that and keeping the Braves kind of hovering around 500 despite their struggles. So I'm going to go with him there for NL MVP. But who you got in the AL?
Yeah, looking at the AL, there's really just one obvious choice, at least in my mind. And I talk about the young players changing the game in baseball, and Vlad Guerrero Jr. has taken that next step up in terms of being a young star in today's game, hitting 335, which is among the league's best in terms of batting average, and he's towards the top of the MLB in home runs with 17. He's actually tied for the league lead with 17 with the other two guys we mentioned, ironically, in Acuna and Tatis. But Vlad, he's been a bright spot in a Blue Jays team that's had a pretty solid season so far. They have a 29-25 record right now. But if he weren't there, they would probably have a losing record right now, and they're currently fighting in a very tight AL East division where they're in fourth place right now, but they could be in the top three, maybe top two in most other divisions that are in the MLB right now. So I think Vlad definitely deserves my pick. He was kind of an average player his first 2 years. Some people actually might have referred to him as kind of that bust, just being a top prospect in the game of baseball, but obviously taking a step up now to being an MVP candidate. He deserves my pick here.
Yeah, as much as I would like to disagree just for the point of not having the same person, I have to agree. I mean, he by far deserves this award. I mean, he leads all position players in wins above replacement, and it's not even close. I mean, he's a half a win above Nick Castellanos there with 3.5 wins above replacement, 335 average, as you said, with 17 homers. In terms of RBIs, he's got 45 RBIs, which is one below Jose Abreu for the league lead. He's been incredible. I mean, that offense in general has been really good. I think the big problem with the Blue Jays and why they're not a better team is, I mean, one, they play in a tough division with the Rays, Red Sox, and Yankees, but two, they don't have great pitching. But, Vlad was one of those guys that was obviously very highly touted coming up, but I was kind of worried there for a while. You know, I was like, oh, is he going to live up to the hype? Is he going to live up to the hype? Well, now he's living up to the hype in a huge way. I mean, he looks like every bit and more of the guy we thought he was coming up through the Blue Jays system. So well deserved there of the AL MVP award. Moving on to, I guess, what you would call, or what we would call the Cy Young Award for the first 2 months. I think in the NL it's a pretty obvious choice, but I have to ask, who do you have?
Chris, I'm going to leave the obvious choice for you just because I have a different choice in mind. I mean, I obviously would go to Grom in this case, but in terms of who's been most valuable to their team, a guy like Kevin Gausman can't really go unnoticed here. And comparing him to DeGrom, he has three more starts than DeGrom has just because he's been hurt at some point in the season. But Gausman, he is an undefeated 6-0 right now and has a 1.4 ERA and 83 strikeouts as well. But in terms of what makes him valuable is that this Giants team is not where anyone expected them to be at the start of this year or at this point in the season. They're 35-21 right now, which is in first place in a stacked NL West division, which features the Padres and the Dodgers, who people thought could both win 100 games this year. And the Giants are competing with both of those teams. And Gausman's been a big part as to why. I mean, that entire rotation's been really a step above what everyone thought they would be. And I think Gabe Kapler is a big reason as to why, as much as that kind of disappoints Chris a little bit, I would imagine. But Gausman has been kind of the ace of that surprising staff right now, and I feel like that deserves my Cy Young pick as much as I would like to give it to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants have been the surprising team of the year. For all of the negative things I had to say about Gabe Kapler, I apologize. From the bottom of my heart, that man has done an incredible job out there in San Francisco. This is a pro Gabe Kapler podcast from now on here. But that's a great pick. I mean, in terms of who's been most valuable to their team, you could definitely make an argument that it is Gausman. In terms of just best pitcher, I have to go with DeGrom. I mean, he's rocking a sub one ERA, which is just ridiculous. I mean, that's not even fair. And I know from experience, having tried to hit him at the world famous Polo Grounds when we played MLB The Show this week, had to bring it up. I think my chase rate was like 100%. Like the dude doesn't throw anything straight. Like it's unfair. Like I had to swing when the ball was coming out of his hand. Like I was starting my swing, and it was still coming up as very late. Or then you'd throw me an off speed pitch, and I'd be like a minute early on it. It's ridiculous. Like if that's even close to what it's like trying to hit his stuff, like I apologize to the rest of the NL East, and more particular for the Phillies players that I yell at every time we're facing him. And I'm like, come on. Like I love watching on TV, and you're like, come on, it's not that hard to get a hit. and then you see how what these guys are throwing. You're like, okay, it's that hard to get a hit. But yeah, he's definitely MVP. 0.71 ERA, 14 and a half strikeouts per nine in 8 starts. He's ridiculous. Enough said.
Yeah, so I think in that MLB The Show game, I had like I think 6 perfect innings with DeGrom. Then I kind of took him out just to give you a chance. But I think that was a 5-1 victory, Mets Phillies. But that was a little revenge for the Wii Sports fiasco. I think it was a month ago that was. But it's nice to finally win one off you.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking out Degrom to make it fair there, and then Alec Boehm went yard. So at least we had that. It's a shame if the Polo Grounds wasn't so, I'll just say, interestingly designed. Maybe I wouldn't have had two back-to-back inside the park homers given up against you there. that was ridiculous. I don't know how any outfielder played at that place and enjoyed themselves is beyond me, because how like you hit the ball into the bullpen, and the bullpen is inside the walls in fair territory.
And
Like,
like there were guys warming up too in there.
it was guys warming up, and like the ball was hit at them. I'm like, what is this stadium? Like, you have a mile of foul grounds and you put the bullpen in fair territory. I'm not really sure what they were thinking, but that is why they don't make ballparks like that today. But it is historic. It is historic for sure.
Hey, God bless James McCann for being able to leg that one out, that inside the park home run that kind of started out the scoring. But we'll run it back. Maybe a different stadium. Maybe I don't use the Grom.
Yeah, definitely for sure. We'll have to run that back soon. But moving on to the AL Cy Young here. Who do you have here?
Yeah, so I think looking at the AL Cy Young side of things, I mean, we've talked about him on this podcast before. He did throw a no-hitter early on in this year, but John Means is the pick for me. He's putting up a 4-1 record this year, 2.05 ERA, very close to being under 2. But he's always been the ace of that Orioles staff, but he was never really considered one of the top pitchers in all of baseball. But I mean, right now, the way he's playing, he's definitely in conversation in like top 20, top 15 pitchers in the game right now. And just the way he's playing, he's kind of jacking up his price, for the trade deadline. If the Baltimore Orioles, they're currently in 5th place in the division. If they want to trade John Means, the option is there. And the longer he continues to perform at the way he does, the bigger his value gets. And it's really just a win for everyone involved, especially John Means to get himself out of Baltimore. But he has been probably the best pitcher in the AL right now, has the best ERA out of any pitcher in the AL right now. It's not leading to wins right now in Baltimore, but when he is pitching, he does have that winning record.
Yeah, I mean that's tough to palate for Orioles fans, trading away a guy that actually pitches well at Camden Yards, considering that's very, and I do mean very, few and far between. But I mean, they should be able to get a haul for him at the deadline. And I guess since you went John Means, and I would like to go John Means, because every time John Means takes the mound, John Means business. But I'm going to have to go with Lance Lynn. I mean, he's been the only guy in the AL better in terms of ERA, with a 1.38 ERA, also 7-1 on the mound for the White Sox. He's been really impressive, and he's another one of those guys like a John Means or even a Taiwan Walker or a Joe Musgrove that isn't going to overpower you with the fastball. He's not throwing, high 90s. He's averaging probably around 94 on the fastball, but he's got some good off speed stuff, and he's getting the job done in Chicago there through his first 10 starts. And, Chicago does have a good rotation there, obviously with Lucas Giolito, but adding him to Giolito and Rodon, they've been awesome through that rotation, and really given them a trio to be feared in the American League. But moving on now to, I believe, what's going to be our last award, and that's Rookie of the Year so far. Now, my pick before the season for Rookie of the Year was going to be from the Pittsburgh Pirates, but Ke'Bryan Hayes did just come back. He's been hurt most of the year, so I'm probably not going to be able to pick him. But Logan, who do you have here for Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, so this is another one will probably leave like the obvious choice to you, but just in terms of who's had like the biggest impact, the biggest spark since joining the league, I mean, Yerman Mercedes might be top two, top three in terms of rookie of the year racing right now. Hitting 299 right now on the season. He that obviously was helped out by a huge first month in April. He's kind of cooled off since the month of May rolled around, but he's still putting up a solid season. 299, 7 home runs so far, and a lot of that is coming in his rookie year. He only had one at bat the year before his rookie year, but the 28-year-old provided a really solid impact for a White Sox team currently dominating in the AL Central right now. And as much as he's kind of feuded with Tony La Russa a little bit throughout the course of the year, he has provided a major spark. They lost James McCann to the Mets. They lost guys like Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert. This White Sox team needed a spark offensively, and they got it from Mercedes at the start of the year. And he has had a very solid start to his career. And we'll see how longer he can keep this up because I mentioned it. He's been cold the month of May. So we'll see if he can keep this up. We'll see if he can turn it into a Rookie of the Year nomination. But overall, Mercedes, he has been a reliable player for the White Sox as much as Tony La Russa will try to deny that or not.
Yeah, I know Tony La Russa right now. I can hear his screams from the Windy City all the way here in Connecticut. But yeah, he's struggled recently. Definitely for May, he would be my pick, or for April, he'd be my pick of the month. He's actually 0 for his last 22. So he is struggling. But in terms of his cumulative numbers, his April was so good. He hit 415 in the month, that even hitting 221 in the month of May. The combined numbers are probably good enough to at least get him a mention there. But you're being nice, giving me all these easy slam dunk picks. But I got to go with Adolis Garcia, who is hitting 283, but leads rookies with 16 home runs. He is really going off, one off of the lead with guys like Vladimir Guerrero, Fernando Tatis, so some big names, and has helped a Texas lineup that is really bad. Like they are not a good lineup at all, but he's kind of been their big threat. By far leading rookies with wins above replacement as well. So he's kind of taken over in a league where I thought, Randy Arozarena, who's having a decent year, hitting 254, 7 homers, would kind of run away with the AL Rookie of the Year. Um, he's kind of running away with it at the moment in my mind, is Adolis Garcia. And I think he's going to parlay that into an All-Star game appearance as, the MLB.com nominations so far. They had him as one of the starters. I can't complain about that. I do have to agree. But moving on to the AL, who gets your nomination for Rookie of the Year? Or for the NL, excuse me.
Yeah, so this is a much weaker league just in terms of rookies. I mean, you got three guys in the AL that could potentially be leading this NL race, but I love what Trevor Rogers is doing in Miami, the starting pitcher there. And he's had a very solid season, too. He's among the top leaders in ERA right now with a 1.87 ERA, has a 6-3 record right now on the year, and has 76 strikeouts to his name. But Rogers is currently fifth in the entire MLB in terms of ERA. And kind of like John Means, it hasn't really led to too many wins just because the Marlins, they are currently in fourth place in that NL East division. But what Rogers is doing to help out this Miami staff, it's definitely been really, really necessary, especially with Sixto Sanchez being hurt for most of the year. And that Miami pitching staff not performing as well as they did when they made the playoffs last year during the COVID shortened season. But the 23-year-old definitely has a really solid future ahead of him, and he's had a really hot start these past 2 months.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the obvious pick here is Trevor Rogers. I mean, he's looked like one of the best pitchers in the game when he's on. I guess to differ a bit, I'm going to go with Pavin Smith. Pavin Smith. Definitely got that wrong. But Smith is hitting 292 with 5 homers. He, I believe, leads most, if not all, NL rookies in batting average, at least that are qualified. Although maybe Jonathan Daza for Colorado might be ahead of him in the NL. But I feel like he's been coming up with a lot of clutch hits recently. especially for a team in Arizona that has played very poorly. He had a good series, I believe, against your Mets there, and 21 RBIs on the year, which also is second among NL rookies to Dylan Carlson, who I was also going to give a nod to, and I believe he leads all rookies in runs in the NL with 33. So he's had a pretty good year. I mean, as you said before, it's kind of a weak crop so far. Nobody's really, I guess, stood out. There's a couple good names. Jazz Chisholm is another one. If he didn't miss, like 20 games or so, or 15 games, and he might be another one that gets my nomination, and very well might by the time the end of June rolls around. But yeah, I think I got to go with Smith for this one.
Yeah, and I think that was probably the second pick. But yeah, aside from Rodgers, not really too much doing in the NL Rookie of the Year. And I mean, if Randy Arozarena were in the NL, I feel like he could be first, possibly second right now in that Rookie of the Year race. But that just goes to show how competitive the AL is. I mean, Garcia, Mercedes kind of dominating that race. I mean, they deserved our awards, but I feel like if either of them went to the other side, they would have no problem getting the NL Rookie of the Year consideration right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, unless somebody gets called up here and kind of goes off, I just don't know who's going to win that race, because there's not a lot of great talent, at least for Rookie of the Year, going on. If I were a betting man, I would say Jazz Chisholm kind of reasserts himself, getting back from injury now, and takes over and wins NL Rookie of the Year. But it's tough. I mean, I could easily see somebody getting called up, around the All Star break, and maybe going on a big run and taking over and winning that award, or at least getting close to winning that award by the end of the year. If Wander Franco, who still hasn't been called up, surprisingly, if he were to get called up, I could easily see him, taking it over if he were in the NL. That's how little depth they seem to have. Well, that's about it for this edition of the Top Prospects podcast. For Logan Bourandas, I'm Chris Lemmo, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.